On today's episode, Liz and I have an insightful and lively discussion with Jason Evert about chastity, pornography, and pure love. He shares all kinds of faith-based insights about chastity, dating, marriage, and what it takes to become better in marriage. Jason Evert has traveled to 6 continents to bring the message of purity to millions of people for more than 20 years. He's a best-selling author of more than 15 books, including St. John Paul the Great, How to Find Your Soulmate Without Losing Your Soul, and the curriculum You, Life, Love, and the Theology of the Body. He is a frequent guest on podcasts and radio programs throughout the country, and his television appearances include MSNBC, Fox News, the BBC, and EWTN. Jason runs the Chastity Project, hosts the podcast Lust is Boring, and leads an international alliance of young people who promote purity in more than 40 countries. We hope you enjoy the show.
Welcome to Stronger Marriage Connection. I'm psychologist Dr. Liz Hale, along with my friend and colleague, the professor, Dr. Dave Schramm. Together, we have dedicated our life's work to bringing you the best we have in valid marital research, along with a few tips and tools to help you create the marriage of your dreams. So typically, when you think of the word chastity, what comes to mind, Dave? What comes to mind for you?
Often it's religious term
Yes.
that we use.
I think of organized religion, even my own. We don't often hear about chastity outside our faith, where the focus is often on purity and saving oneself for marriage and then forsaking all others after marriage. Well, regardless of your beliefs, these are not bad principles to live by if you want to avoid some unnecessary additional pain and heartache. Well, our guest today is an expert on the topic. Author and presenter Jason Evert has traveled 6 continents over the last 20 years, bringing the message of purity to millions. Welcome to Stronger Marriage Connection, Jason.
Thank you for having me on.
Please describe for us, for starters, this overarching definition of chastity, whether we're single, dating, or married.
Yeah, I think a lot of people confuse the word chastity with other terms such as celibacy, abstinence, virginity, and kind of get them all commingled and aren't quite sure what means what. So I guess it'd be helpful to define what it does not mean. Celibacy is the state of not being married. That's what that word means. Abstinence means just abstaining from sex. Virginity means you haven't had sexual intercourse yet. So those are all kind of distinct terms. Whereas chastity is related to these things, but distinct, because with chastity is a virtue, kind of like courage or honesty, that applies to your sexuality. Now, it doesn't eliminate sexual desires, but what it does is it orders them according to the demands of authentic human love. And so the function of chastity or purity of heart is to free us to love, because if I can't say no to my sexual impulses, then saying yes to them really doesn't mean anything. Like if I never really obtain self-mastery as a man, a guy who doesn't have self-control will never even make love to his own wife. He'll kind of just use his wife's body as an outlet for what he thinks of as his sexual needs. And I think a woman's heart can perceive the difference. And so it frees you to love through that gift of self-mastery. But then it also equips you to know if you're authentically being loved. Because if a person's unwilling to be with you, if you're not offering them that thing, then it shows it's not really you that they desire, but the pleasure that they can get from you. And so essentially what it is using the gift of our sexuality according to God's plan for that, regardless of what state of life you're in, whether you're single or married or religious. It's the correct use of that gift of sexuality, not just what you're not doing in the bedroom, but what I'm doing with my imagination, the way that I dress, the way that I speak in conversations. Am I really practicing that gift of purity and living it out? And so the ultimate goal is that this virtue frees us to love, to see God. Jesus said, "Blessed are the pure in heart, they'll see God." Meaning if we're not pure of heart, we're going to have a pretty tough time seeing him, not just in the next life, but in ourselves, in our partners, and in the faith altogether. So that's kind of a nutshell definition of chastity.
Self-mastery. That's really quite beautiful. And I suppose it's not just even self-mastery in masturbation or sexual expression, but probably even just in our words we use or our anger, our tone. Could it be across the board?
Oh, without a doubt, because, either a man governs his passions or his passions govern him. One of them is going to be in the lead. And so if I'm always dominated by my passions, whether they be my temper, my impurity of this or that, it's to that extent I'm not free. I would say that our freedom is best measured by our capacity to love. And so whatever inhibits my ability to love, my self-absorption, my pride, my lust, my addiction, it's to that very extent that I'm not free. And so if I'm a guy who says, well, I don't need to be tied down by a girlfriend, a wife, and kids, I'm free. It's like, no, you are completely enslaved by your self-absorption. You are not a free person.
That is powerful.
That's a powerful thought. Yeah, that self-control. Jason, we love the title of your podcast. Lust is boring. What exactly are you referring to using this catchy phrase?
Yeah, well, lust, kind of like the word chastity, has a lot of misconceptions. People think, well, lust is sexual passion. What do you mean sexual passion is boring? You're telling me that it's a sin to be sexually attracted to people and that's boring? No way, you're crazy. That's not what lust is. Lust is the reduction of another human being to their sexual value. And so what chastity is not denying their sexual value. It's like, no. Like they've got sexual value, but there needs to be a hierarchy of values, that their personal value must come above their sexual value. What lust does is it inverts those things. So your sexual value becomes the best thing that you have to offer me. And so you're reducing a person to an object to be used for your gratification. And as exciting as that might feel in the moment, in the end, it gets kind of boring because we weren't created to use other people or to be used. We were created to be loved. And so once you see God's plan for human love, it's then that lust looks boring.
Yeah. Wow. Personal value over sexual value. I love that. I have not heard it used that way. That's great. You seem to have a tender spot for young single adults, like Liz and I do as well. Tell us about the Chastity Project and your work internationally with young adults.
Yeah, well, we speak starting about junior high is where we start. We do the junior high assemblies, high school chastity talks. We do a talk on college campuses called Dating 101, where we actually teach them how to date without just having to hide behind a cell phone and ghosting people, just giving them the specifics instead of swiping back and forth and commodifying each other. And then outside of college, we do these things called John Paul II Trails, where we lead wilderness backpacking retreats for young adults to just get them a chance to meet each other. Because I think the church really has an obligation and a duty to facilitate opportunities for young adult singles to meet each other and begin their vocations. We have to help them in this. I was just in San Diego yesterday, and it was a real joy because I used to live out there for 14 years. And when I came there as a single young adult, I started up a Bible study. And, within a couple of months, we had 70 young adults coming to it. And thanks be to God, it's still running now, 25 years later, more than a decade after I left the thing. And a woman came up to me yesterday and she said, I met my husband at your Bible study. And she said, you know what? I have two other friends who met their spouses at your Bible study. And now between all of us, they've got like 15 kids and 3 marriages. And it was just, it did so good. It was such good to my heart. So this is what the church needs to do. Like we need to give them opportunities to meet each other and then not simply tell them what not to do. Don't do this and don't do that, but actually teach them principles of courtship, of marital discernment. Because the big point here, I think today that we need to stress is that marriage preparation is not what you do 6 months before the wedding date. We got to take some marriage prep class. We're going to get ready. Dude, that's triage. Like that's last minute stuff. And that's when we're spending more time getting ready for the wedding than we are for the marriage. We've got to understand marriage prep should not only just be immediately before the marriage, but proximate and remote. So what I'm doing talking to 14-year-old kids about chastity, it's marriage preparation when it should be happening.
That is very, very cool. I don't think it can happen early enough in that regard. We have our podcast. It's housed at Utah State University, Jason. So there are many college co-eds listening to you today. What's your advice for them on how to ensure that they're looking for the right partner, going to choose the right partner?
I like to create kind of a grid. Like if you could imagine like 4 squares. This square is it's the right person and it's the right time to date. Over here, it's the right person to date, but it's not really the right time to date. And then over here, it's the right time to date, but it's not really the right person. And then down here, it's wrong person, wrong time. And so maybe try to figure out where are you landing in that grid right now? Well, hey, I feel like it's the right time to date. I've got my life together. I've dealt with any unprocessed trauma. I've gotten rid of my addictions. I'm ready to begin my vocation. Hey, it really sounds like you got the right time, but I just haven't found the right person. Okay, we'll just focus on the friendships for the meantime. Or no, I really think I found the right person and it's the right time. Okay, we'll go. I mean, the most overlooked aspect of discernment is action. Ask her on a date, see what happens, give it a shot. But you've got to make sure to do the due diligence beforehand. Am I ready to date? Do I need to deal with some junk in my life that I know full well if I drag this into marriage, it'd be toxic to my future vocation. Deal with it now. Go to counseling. Find a spiritual director. Don't drag that baggage into your marriage thinking it's going to be a car wash. It doesn't work that way. All that stuff is going to be like a bunch of clothes or toys jammed into a closet for 5 years. Then you open the thing and it all pours out. That's not a great wedding gift. So deal with your stuff. But then also know what you're looking for in a future spouse, what your non-negotiables are. Come up with that list. Make it obviously reasonable, but make your standards high as heaven. And don't just wait for that perfect person, because that's a mistake. Like, is she the one? Is that the one? Where's that perfect person? No. It's not about finding some perfect person to complete you. It's about loving your future spouse enough right now to grow in the virtues and perfection to become the person that they deserve for you to be. That's the best thing you could do for them, is not only have your list, but become your list. Focus on that stuff instead of doing what I call missionary dating, where you date someone hoping you can fix them and change them and rehabilitate them or resuscitate them or whatever. It's like, no, don't date a project. Don't date your imagination. Date someone hoping they're going to stay who they are for the rest of their life. Otherwise, you're dating who you thought they were or who you hope they'll be. And you get so hung up on this vision of the person that it becomes like a hallucinogenic drug that you keep taking to distract yourself from the reality of the present dysfunction. And so focus in the present moment without trying to fix them and change them, rehabilitate them. If you're not sure, well, am I being too picky? Is this a deal breaker? Ask yourself, well, would you be content 10 years from now in marriage if that thing never changed? And if the answer is like, no, I would not be content, don't move forward.
Wow. Can we hear an amen? Okay. Amen. Very good. I love that. You're passionate. Thank you for that.
Yeah. Now, you advise men and women, single, married, to abstain from pornography, Jason. And I, as a relationship scholar on this side, I have some colleagues who study this quite a bit, and I don't know of any study that shows, the benefits of pornography. Almost all the research from an academic point of view now is showing that this is not healthy, not helpful for individuals or for couples. What's your take on that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, people say, well, nobody's getting hurt. Like, can you say a statement that's further from the truth? I mean, consider the woman in the porn industry. Like, how many millions are trapped in the sex trade industry? People say, well, yeah, but there's some people willing to do it. Okay, how's your life going right now? What was her childhood like? Did she suffer sexual abuse as a kid? Like, what's going on? Because, I've met these women. I've talked to them. I know what's going on in their life. They're not happy, well-adjusted people. These are extremely distressed individuals who are being used in a horrific way. And the porn companies are just generating from our weakness as men. And not just men. Obviously, women struggle with these things as well. This isn't what we want. This is like starving to death and standing at the window of a restaurant, looking in at the food, thinking it's going to fill your stomach. No, this is not going to satisfy us, because sexual intimacy is not supposed to be some spectator event. It's supposed to be for a husband and a wife. And to make this some public spectacle not only injures the person involved in the industry, what about the future kids raised in a family where their dad is a 35-year-old porn addict who's got to slap his laptop shut when his 5-year-old girl walks in the room because she can't see what dad's seeing? She's deprived of the father she deserves to have, who would not objectify women and be getting aroused on women when his wife is in the next room experiencing sexual betrayal trauma because he has to look for another woman to find satisfaction. That cuts her deeply at the core. It sends home this message: you are not enough for me. And so she'll try to live up and compete with these women in porn, but she can't. There's no way she can, because women in porn can't even compete with the women in porn. If they could, there'd just be one woman in one porn site and everybody would just stay faithful to that. But it trains you in the habit of mental polygamy. He's robbing himself of the capacity to be captivated by a single woman. And he thinks, well, nope, nobody's getting hurt. It's like, dude, you're a shadow of the husband and the man your wife and children need you to become. And so women deserve better than porn. Children, husbands, this is just a counterfeit of love. And marriage is not the fulfillment of porn. I mean, porn is the distortion of human love. And so we need to be very firm on this stuff. This has no place in dating. And ladies, if you're dating a guy who's looking at porn, he's not ready to date anybody if he's still looking at porn, because a guy can't ask a woman to commit to him unless he's actually prepared to be faithful to her. And porn is cheating. If you're like, no, it's not, I'm not actually touching her. What's your idea of fidelity? Just body parts? Don't touch body parts. What about your heart? your imagination, your intellect, your like all that is off limits. And like, I can do whatever I want as long as I'm faithful in the bedroom. It's just a skeleton of the idea of fidelity.
Wow. That's so true.
We'll be right back after this brief message. And we're back. Well, let's dive right in.
I have a cute family member, college age, just graduated, dating someone of a different faith, very opposingly different. I'm sure they have long discussions about this. I'm concerned about them and the painful road that's ahead with differing religions. Is that a concern of yours? And what's your advice for such couples?
Yeah, if we're of different faiths, that will always cause suffering unless neither one of them cares about the religion at all. As long as both of them don't care about the religion in the least, probably won't cause a lot of problems. But if even one of them does, this will cause challenges. Trust me, marriage is hard enough when you agree on all things theological. It becomes a lot more difficult when you can't see eye to eye, because the kids would be like, well, Mom, how come Dad goes to mass and you think that's, worshiping Mary? Or why is this going on? And so there's going to be this tug of war. And typically children will follow the spiritual path of the father. And so if the dad's an atheist, the studies on this are incredible, that if you have, the best possible outcome is for the devout mom and devout dad on the same faith spiritually. Vast majority of kids will follow in that way. If the mom is highly religious, but the dad is not, typically the kids will just follow the dad. If the dad's highly religious, but the mom is not, the kids will still follow the dad. They typically gravitate towards him as the spiritual head of the father, whether or not they know that that's actually theologically sound. They go in that direction, which means when you're doing marital discernment, you got to really think, okay, do I want a spouse who's going to pray with my kids? Who's going to pray with me when I get my cancer diagnosis? And we've got to be able to, to seek a higher power and grace to get through this difficult marital time. To me, that's a really important factor. I want to be able to share in that spiritual way with someone. But if that's not on your radar and you don't care and they don't care, probably not going to cause a lot of difficulty. But if you date someone hoping, well, I'm going to convert them, I'm going to change them, what if that doesn't materialize? I do know of, couples where the wife's evangelical, the husband's Catholic, and they've got a beautiful, happy, harmonious marriage. But then I do know of couples that agree on all things theological that have a dumpster fire of a marriage. So it's not like we should put all our eggs in this basket, but we've got to be prudent in realizing if your faith is important to you, it's probably going to be really helpful to find someone who shares that belief, so you don't have to always hope and wish they would convert, because then if they don't, you're left with that disappointment. I don't think it's fair to them or to you.
Yeah, such a disappointment, right? Kind of that aching heart that never really goes away. And it's got to get in the way between your relationship if you're always wanting them to be someone different. It's well said. What are the insights do you have for couples, Jason, of all ages, really, who are wanting to find that special someone? And do you have an opinion on dating sites? I love your thought about the church bringing in singles. And we're doing our fair share of that. I think there's a lot of amazing LDS groups coming together. Thousands gathered down at the Salt Palace just this past summer. It's exciting. What are your thoughts about how we get together, and other advice, please?
Yeah, I think one is to avoid the secular dating apps altogether. The Tinders, Hitch, just stay off of those things, because it really commercializes dating and makes women not so much a priority, but just an option. Because no. Oh, she's pretty, click. It's like, okay, well, what if every woman in Utah looked exactly like that woman? Why would you have picked this one against her? Like, what if they just took all images off dating websites and you just had to go off their personal qualities? People would be like, well, I'm not touching that. It's like, wait a minute. Well, yeah, because what if I really like someone's profile, but then I meet them in person, they're unattractive? It's like, okay, but what if you find someone attractive and there's a lot of chemistry there, but then when it actually comes to the personality match, you guys are a big mismatch. That's why when a lot of people think, well, you need to become sexually intimate with someone, that way you can know if you're really compatible. It's like, whoa, that is the worst compatibility test imaginable, because what that does is it binds you and then it blinds you. Because what if it's all fireworks in the bedroom, but you guys can't even get along in the kitchen? That lack of compatibility can be covered up by the intoxicating power of sexual intimacy. You need your blinders off and see in 2020 when it comes to marital discernment. And once you engage in sexual intimacy, your judgment is toast. So I think when it comes to these apps, Physical attraction is great. I think it's important, but it's just like the raw material of love, so to speak. You can have that desire, and hopefully that graduates into a fondness for the person, not just merely an attraction and a desire for union, but I'm really fond of this person. They possess virtue. They bring out the best in me. And then that'll spawn a desire for union. But if this doesn't graduate into love is goodwill, I want what is best for this human being, then it remains on the plane of I don't long for the good of you. I long for you as a good for me. This is not authentic love. It has to reach that love of benevolence. And so that's why I would recommend try to use dating apps that align with your faith. If you're Catholic, you can go to catholicmatch.com, catholicsingles.com, catholicchemistry.com. They're out there. I'm sure there's stuff for the LDS church and the evangelical world. And it's not a guarantee. Trust me. And sometimes the bigger these websites are, the more diluted the pool can be, where a person's like, oh, I like church. And like, oh, really? When did you go last? I think when I was baptized, I think I was like a week old. It's like, oh, okay, here. So you need some discernment there.
Oh, boy. Yeah, I get it. My husband and I, we met at 50 on LDS Planet. Yeah. So I don't know that I would have met people otherwise. I had a hard time meeting people, especially psychologists. You're not going to date your clients, obviously. I'm a marriage therapist on top of that. So anyway, I do have something positive to say about certain religious sites. I agree with you there.
And I agree, get get there, make yourself available, because a lot of people as single young adult professionals are trying and they're looking, and the workplace, not beating them here, the gym, not quite, the bar scene, not quite. Take advantage of these gifts of technology. They could be misused. And I don't really believe in online dating, but I do believe in online meeting. Dating has to take place face to face, rooted in reality. But that doesn't mean you can't meet a potential date on some of these sites. See, wow, man, you've been looking for the same qualities I am. And hey, maybe it's a little bit of long distance to get started, but hey, let's see what happens. So take some risk, put yourself out there, give it a shot, go on a couple dates, see what happens. Obviously, stay safe, when it comes to meeting strangers, things like that, but make yourself available as women and as men. Get out there, see what happens.
Well said. It's not for the faint of heart, is it? It's not easy. And yet it can be worth it if you do find your match. It's all worth it.
Yeah. Well said. I love that. Jason, you're an advocate for chastity, both inside and outside the marriage, but we don't often hear about maintaining an element of chastity throughout the course of marriage. Please share with us, how does chastity look inside the marriage, during the marriage?
Well, I think we've got to begin with, if chastity is using the gift of sex according to God's plan for it, then what's God's plan for sex? And the way that we understand it is that the purpose of sex is for babies and bonding. That's kind of why God created it. Those things kind of go together. But the meaning of our sexuality, I would say, is that it's our wedding vows made flesh. That when you stand on the altar, you make these promises. You come here today freely without reservation. Yes. To give yourselves totally to the other. Yes, total. Now, do you promise to be faithful to one another? Yes, it'll be faithful. Will you welcome children into this marriage? Yes. If God blesses us, absolutely. So you're promising with your words that your love is free and total and faithful and fruitful. And then you leave the sanctuary of that church. You enter the sanctuary of the bedroom, and on the altar bed, you exchange those vows, not with your words, but with your body. I give my body to you freely. I'm not coercing you. I'm not manipulating you. I'm not pressuring you. It's freely received. And it's also freely given. I'm not dominated by my hormones, seeing you as an outlet for my lust. It's a free gift of self. It's total. I hold back nothing from you, not even my fatherhood. It is a free gift. It's a total gift. And it's a faithful gift, not just with my body, but my imagination, my heart. And it's a fruitful gift. It's ordered towards procreation instead of deliberately sterilized. So essentially what you're doing is you're speaking your wedding vows with your body. That's why sex outside of marriage is a lie in the language of the body. The body is saying, I give myself completely to you. I am totally yours. But if they're not married, it isn't true. And so the total gift of the body should correspond to the total gift of the person, which is marriage. There was a movie in which this guy sleeps with Cameron Diaz. And afterwards, she says to him, don't you know when you make love to a woman, your body makes a promise to her, whether you do or not. And so the promise of sex is I'm completely yours. So in marriage, how should I be using that gift of my sexuality? Well, one, obviously no pornography, those kinds of things. But also it's possible for a husband to use his wife, to lust after his wife. And this can create sexual frigidity in the woman, because she feels like, wow, like you want to be so intimate with me in that way, but you won't even have a conversation with me until we get in the bedroom. And then you expect all of this intimacy. It's like, why aren't you expressing love to me in my love language in this way? And it can create a lot of frigidity and resentment within this relationship. In fact, I know one theologian who said that sexual frigidity in women is actually more difficult to master than the sexual drive itself, because it's often fueled by a man's selfishness and brutality, demanding that I have my needs that must be met. And with very little disregard for the level of satisfaction she's receiving it through that act. As long as he's satisfied, he's fine. Over time, that generates a lot of resentment, frigidity. But the virtue of chastity kind of creates a culture of tenderness, not in the sense of just, physically gentle or whatever, but tenderness in the sense I'm perceiving the needs of my spouse and placing those before my own needs. Well, when one feels seen in that way, and her husband realizes that abstinence can be an expression of love, even inside of marriage, whether it's I'm traveling at work and I need to be abstinent tonight of faithfulness because I'm away from my wife. It's an expression of love. I get home, my wife's exhausted from being with the kids. She's not feeling well. Okay, my abstinence tonight is an expression of love for you. And in fact, it's a greater expression of love than making love, because I'm actually doing what's best for you instead of what feels good for me. And so you start to see, wow, like this virtue of chastity it's not just true, it's not just good, it's beautiful. Because a woman is very perceptive in the way that a man looks at her, not just from 100 yards away, but especially up close. And if she perceives that he's looking at her as some just thing to be used, it creates a lot of restlessness and guardedness, not just guys at the bar, inside the marriage. But if the guy can grow in this virtue of purity, you read this book of Psalms, and there's a line in there that's just fire, where it says, the woman says, I became in his eyes as one who finds peace. And it's like, whoa, hit the brakes. She's saying that the very way that he looks at her gives her restfulness. This was the gaze that Adam originally had towards Eve, that he could look at her naked body as a revelation of his call to love her as God loves her. But when sin came into the picture, he no longer saw her body as an invitation to love, but a temptation of the thing to be used. And so she guards herself. She covers herself to protect her personal value. But what purity allows us to experience is nakedness without shame. Because what shame could there possibly be in being looked at with authentic love? And so I think when you explain it this way, women are like, ugh, that's what I want. And I think guys think like, I want to be able to look at her that way, but I've been pornified from all these images that polluted my brain. How do I look at her this way? And so it's not something like I sign my chastity commitment card. It's a daily battle, but it's one worth fighting. And it requires sacrifice, but love isn't afraid of sacrifice. Love is sacrifice. That's the food of love.
Wow.
That's really powerful.
Yes.
There's got to be another side to this too. So when you talked about being out of town and coming home, your wife's exhausted, not feeling well, giving her my abstinence is a sign of my love. Yes. And I would suppose a partner, a wife, has a similar view. Is like, wow, you are doing this for me.
Well,
your abstinence is a sign of love for me. And what is going to be my return, my reciprocation? Pardon me.
Well, I appreciate you bringing that up, because a lot of times you read those passages in the script are like, when you get married, the husband's body is not his own. It belongs to his wife. And the wife's body is not her own. It belongs to the husband. Those verses could be misused of the husband saying, well, that's what the Bible says. You got it, whether you like it or not, and it can be really misused. But I think if there's that culture of tenderness towards each other, she might realize, what, I might not really be in the mood, but hey, if this is what I've got to do, just make my husband feel loved and special and respected and connected. Oh, I can do that. That's not that huge ask to be close to my husband. Maybe it's not my love language right now, but hey, he sacrifices a lot for our family. He does. Rush hour traffic. He does a lot of stuff he doesn't really want to do at the top of his list because he loves us. And if this can be an expression of love for him, I remember corresponding through email with a wife once who was struggling with this. And she said, look, when it comes to sexual intimacy, it's not happening unless I am 100% into it and interested in wanting and desire it. It's not right for me to engage in that unless it's 100%. And I said, well, could you think of any other act of love in marriage where we could say that? Like, I am not touching those dishes unless I'm 100% want to scrub that dried out pasta from the plate. I am not going to mow lawn. I'm not going to go to work. I'm not. It's like, wait a minute. we've got to understand that there's got to be a breathing in a sense. Like I'm exhaling for you. You're inhaling for me. Like there's a back and forth, a give and take instead of just like, nope, I'm not going there unless really is something I want to do. That's not going to be a sustainable thing. And so I think what you're leading to is so healthy that there's got to be a give and take. And we've got to see the others' sacrifices they're making, acknowledge that, appreciate that, and reciprocate it. Without that, you don't have a healthy marriage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. That was powerful, Jason. Wow. Jason, at this point in our interview, we like to ask each of our guests a couple of questions. With all of your personal, your professional experience, what would you say is the key to a stronger marriage connection?
Well, I think one of the things that we alluded to earlier on that especially should focus on the singles is that the point of marital discernment, of knowing how to choose the right spouse instead of falling in love with the idea of marriage or the idea of a future spouse. Because what we do when we enter into a relationship, we bring with us preconceived hopes and expectations of what we hope the other person will be. And if that person exhibits even the smallest degree of that quality, we bestow upon them beyond all reasonable bounds the fullness of that attribute. So if I take a girl on the first date, hoping to find a wife who's generous and kind, and then we finish at the Italian restaurant, go outside, and she gives her leftovers to a homeless guy on the bench. And I start thinking like, oh, like I'm dating Mother Teresa. Like this is like, dude, no, she was just full, couldn't fit any more lasagna in her belly. So she gave it to the poor guy. Like, don't read into it too much. And so I think a lot of times we bring in all these hopes. We give the person those attributes they might not have. We get attached to the image. And then when the red flags show up, it's like, well, I'm already this deep in. I don't want to start over. And then sometimes people start cohabiting, thinking that that's going to make for a stronger marriage, when every study show it just weakens marital stability in the long run. So don't slide into marriage through cohabiting and all these dreams of who you want them to be. No, marry the person that they are, not who you remember them being or who you hope they'll be. Only commit to someone hoping they're going to be who they are for the rest of their life. And if you do that, then obviously it's not going to be all sunshine and roses. There's going to be, the cross is going to come. I mean, Christ crucified is going to visit your marriage in particular ways that you may not have been expecting. Sometimes seasons of abstinence could last longer than you had ever expected. Like there's all types of hidden crosses that are going to come. But if you're entering into that marriage with the desire of the goodwill of the other person, those trials will help you to sink deeper roots in that marriage. Whereas if you chose that person because of a kind of a synchronization of emotional and sensual experiences, eventually that reality will come to the surface in a very painful way. I didn't choose this person because of their personal value. I chose them because of the reactions I experienced when I was with them. And now that those reactions are subsiding a bit and their personal value is coming to light, I feel like we're just kind of left in a vacuum here. Like, wait a minute, this isn't what I signed up for. And so I think so much needs to be focused on premarital discernment.
Yeah, well said. And there's so much disillusionment that can happen too along the way, right? In marriage, even with chemistry. I don't know what your thoughts are, Jason, with chemistry. Does chemistry change? Let's say it brings a couple together. Does it keep a couple together? Or if the chemistry hasn't always been there, can it grow? Can it develop?
Yeah. Yes to all of the above. I mean, it waxes and wanes, and you hear people in the dating life saying, I love you. I'm just not in love with you anymore. It's like, I don't know that you really love me. I think you love the feeling of being in love with me. When the feeling went away, you went away, because what you were committed to was your own feeling rather than me as a person. So that's why it's so important we're committing because of the person's value as a human being, not from an attraction or experience. But yeah, it's a test of love when the sensual or emotional reactions themselves fade a bit. And some people think, oh my goodness, love is gone. And you don't need to panic. I mean, young love is like a little river, a stream. It's splashing. It's a brook. It's exciting to watch. But as the banks widen and it deepens, it becomes more like the Mississippi. It might not look like it's moving very fast, but it can take a house away in its current. I think of a young couple I had read about. They went on an early date in their relationship, and they were just sitting across in the restaurant, talking. I look over, there's an elderly couple sitting over there, not even speaking to each other. I'm like, that's so sad. And they kept talking. And then finally the bill comes, and this elderly couple hadn't even spoken to each other. And they were just feeling so sorry for them. And they got up, and as they were walking out, they looked by the table, and they noticed underneath the grandma and grandpa were just playing footsie with each other underneath the table. And they realized that they had said what needed to be said, and they could be in that presence of each other without needing all the fun stuff. And so that type of deeper, stable bond attachment, I think, is what we're going for. And that's why you only want to marry your best friend. I mean, how important is that? I mean, friendship is like the foundation beneath the structure of romantic love. Like the biggest building in the world, the Burj Khalifa, is built on the sands of the Middle East. How you do that is with hundreds of thousands of tons of concrete. That's the foundation of friendship underneath romantic love. And so make sure you've got that foundation, then romance can stand the test of time.
Love it. Thank you. Jason, where can our listeners find out more about you as well as your resources and books, my friend?
Our website is just chastity.com. So chastity.com. And there they can connect with us through Instagram, through X, through Facebook, Twitter. We got all of that, YouTube. The podcast Lust is Boring. All of these resources to connect with us at chastity.com. We've got more than 25 books on the subject for young adult singles, for people struggling with porn addiction, whether it be a guy or a woman, resources for parents, all kinds of stuff at chastity.com.
You do indeed. Thank you for that.
Yeah, that's great. We'll be sure to put those links in our show notes, so listeners go check those out. Hey, Jason, for all the things we've discussed today, is there a main takeaway? We call it our takeaway of the day, a take-home message you want our listeners to remember.
I remember a quote from Pope John Paul II where he said, "Love is a constant challenge thrown to us by God." And so simmer on that for a little bit. God is throwing you a challenge of love. That love isn't merely a feeling. There are feelings sometimes, but it's an act of the will that kind of consists of preferring the good of the other to the good of myself. That's what love is. And so talk is cheap. Really pay attention. How does this person leave me feeling when I spend time with them? Am I anxious? Is there a lot of bickering and jealousy and resentment and this and that? Like, really pay attention to what's going on in your core. Does this person bring you a sense of stability and peace and reassurance and being cherished, or instability, fear of being used? Does this person really love me for the right reasons? Why do they treat me this way? How can I change them? Really pay attention and trust your gut. And in the meantime, just keep your standards high as heaven.
Excellent. Thank you. Liz, what about you? What's your takeaway of the day with Jason Evert?
So many, all these copious notes here. I really was struck by the culture of just tenderness as well as self-mastery. I think, again, it goes back to, as you've often said, Dave, healthy we is made up of two healthy me's. And I love that. I'm going to be thinking about tenderness and self-mastery throughout the day today. I appreciate that. Dave, what about you? What struck you most with our time together with Jason Evert?
Yeah, Jason, thanks so much for your insights. I think the main theme for me that runs through it all is this kind of this outward mindset. It's not about me, right? Pornography is about me. It's this self first, but it's this outward mindset of putting another person, at least taking into account, having compassion and seeing the world from their perspective is critical through all of this. So Jason, thank you so much for coming on. You've shared so much for our listeners. We appreciate you and your time today.
Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, keep up the good work, you and Crystalline both. And remember, friends, it's the small and simple things that create a stronger marriage connection. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining us today. Hey, do us a favor and take a second to subscribe to our podcast and the Utah Marriage Commission YouTube channel at Utah Marriage Commission, where you can watch this and every episode of the show. Be sure to smash the like button, leave a comment, and share this episode with a friend. You can also follow and interact with us on Instagram at Stronger Marriage Life and Facebook at Stronger Marriage. So be sure to share with us which topics you loved or which guests we should have on the show next. If you want even more resources to improve your marriage or relationship connection, visit strongermarriage.org, where you'll find free workshops, e-courses, in-depth webinars, relationship surveys, and more. Each episode of Stronger Marriage Connection is hosted and sponsored by the Utah Marriage Commission at Utah State University. And finally, a big thanks to our producer, Rex Polanis, and the team at Utah State University, and you, our audience. You make this show possible. The opinions, findings, conclusions, and recommendations expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the views of the Utah Marriage Commission.